Welcome to the Atlanta Men's Workshop speaker and workshop recordings. Atlanta Men's Workshop is held every spring and fall at the Rock Eagle 4-H campus in Eatonton, Georgia. That's just about an hour east of Atlanta, Georgia. Please visit our website at atlantamensworkshop.com or see the link below to find dates and details to join us. Partial scholarships are available to those in need. We hope you enjoy this presentation, and we hope you will come join us at the Rock. Until then, we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Oh. What up, Chip? My name's Chip. I'm an alcoholic. If you're kind of new to this thing, you watched Alcoholics Anonymous in action when Jules was doing the sobriety and Wayne was doing the sobriety thing. Because if you're like me, when I was new, I wanted applause. And if you watch the countdown, it's Alcoholics Anonymous in its purest form. Because if you listen to the meter, the new guy got just the same amount of applause as the old guy. And that's called Alcoholics Anonymous, because the highest rank you get here is a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're new here, you've claimed your seat, the price has been paid, well, welcome. I've got a home group. I want to thank, where's Alan at? Busy Alan. Where did he go? He ran. I want to thank Alan for running and picking us up at the airport. It was very easy for Chuck and I. We're beach neighbors down in Destin. We're at the same home group. It was very easy for Chuck and I to get to the airport, get on an airplane. My wife took us to the airport, didn't she? And then she launched off and went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, because she's at a podium right now in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we got on the airplane and we flew up here, and it was no consequence. But you have people that have gone through a great ordeal just recently to keep their commitments to come up here. And one of them is your Sunday morning speaker, Ron, because Ron was right in the eye of the hurricane that just blew Florida in half. So there's our buddy Ron right there. Thanks for making it here, Ron. We got to talk in Kansas City together, and it was like they moved it to a different location, so it was like at the old Civic Auditorium. And if you ever been to the Grand Ole Opry, the Ryman Theater, they had stages and stages and stages of people, and you're talking, and they're all waving at you. But this is my very first time at the Rock. I am a Central Florida Men's Workshop addict, and how many we got here from Central Florida Men? Yep. How many people are here from Cabin 55? Yes, the best cabin. We had our meeting and we voted. We're it. We're ready. We have a various multitude of sobriety. We're ready to take fifth steps. So at 10 o'clock at night, it'll be like altar call. We'll be behind the veil, and you can go ahead and read it off to us. We're fully prepared. I've got a home group, just like Chuck does, just like Ron does, just like everybody does. Mine is called Busters for Sobriety in the little fishing village of Destin, Florida. We meet every single morning at 8 o'clock, and people say, why? And we say, because we need to. The Destin police appreciate it. The families appreciate it. We are a destination. We call ourselves Disney Destin, so we're a destination location. People will either come for the fishing, or they'll come for the 5 PGA-rated golf courses, or they'll come just the ambiance of that emerald green water and the sugar white sand beaches where Chuck and I get to live. We get to live in a place where people dream of visiting one day. And it's because of the things that have happened in our lives. And you're going to hear Chuck's story tomorrow night. If you heard us at the Central Florida Men's Retreat, or Men's Workshop, I'm sorry, but they gave us an extra hour here at the Atlanta Men's Workshop. So we'll be doing this for 2 hours long. I've got a sobriety date. We were talking about that. Somebody asked me, they said, you don't look like you've been sober 36 years, 10 months, and 19 days. And I said, where is the picture in the big book of what I'm supposed to look like? None of us look like we were supposed to be sober however much period of time that we're sober. My sobriety date is like Neil with the class of 1987. How many people here are class of 1987? 3, 4. We were at the Florida State Convention with 2,250 people. I asked the same question, and there were 5. So my question to you tonight is, where are all the people you sobered up with? Because there are a lot of us got sober in 1987. A lot of us. Hit start. I have no reason to be an alcoholic. I really want to thank the guys that put this thing together. Chuck is on it. Chuck is a committee member of Summer Serenity at the Beach down in Destin, Florida. I'm a committee member of the Gulf Coast Roundup. Shameless plug, we have flyers out there at the top of the room. I'm also a member of the Edisto Beach Roundup committee because we love that roundup so much. So we know what it takes to put one of these things on year after year after year. The faces do change, but the events don't. The events don't. So thank you for everybody that has put it. Where's the barbecue dudes at? You guys like herd together, don't you? That was an amazing barbecue. You see how many people got fed, and the line kept going and going and going. Okay, so I have no reason to be an alcoholic. I promise you that. I was raised the son of a naval officer that used to be enlisted. The son of a naval officer that used to be enlisted. He was a dental technician, and he was one of the original Navy Mustangs that was selected and offered a commission, the first time it had ever happened in the history of the Navy, to become a commissioned officer. And he was born in 1928 in Peekskill, New York. Got a long lineage of the French-Irish Belgians. I have shook every single tree, and I have not found an alcoholic nut to fall out yet. My mother was born in Wiggins, South Carolina, and she was born in 1930, and she is still alive today. She'll be 95 years old on June the 10th. My dad just passed away with 93 years old a couple of years ago. And he was a hero in my life, and because of the fact that I was with him for 33 years sober, 34 years sober, our lives had totally changed. I have a brother that's 7 years younger than I am. I have a sister that's a year and a half older than I am. And I always wondered when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, why in the world am I carrying the cross of the family? And then I understood why I became an alcoholic. You know how it is when you're new and you figure stuff out. I went to my brother and sister. I said, I know exactly why I'm an alcoholic. Look at the way that we were raised. Strict military discipline. White glove inspections. We had to move every single year. We went with the Marine Corps. When the Navy Medical Service Corps always went with the Marine Corps. How many veterans do we have out here? Thank you very much for your service to our country. I'm retired Air Force. I retired in 1994 with 20 years, 10 months, and 4 days, but who's counting? You'll hear an Army guy tomorrow night, and then an Air Force guy again Sunday. I told my brother and sister, I know exactly. We were raised in such strict star charts. I don't know if any of you guys had star charts. Allowances, 25 cents a week. We had to do our little star chart to get our allowances. I said, I know, look at the way we were raised. I know exactly why I'm an alcoholic. And my brother and sister had never been to an AA meeting or an Al-Anon meeting, and they go, you know, all three of us were raised by the same parents. And you're the only one that ended up naked in a solitude room in a nut ward. And the great mantra of AA hit me. It's not them. At some time in my life, I became incapable of controlling and enjoying my drinking. As the big book says, I lost the ability to either control the amount I was drinking or stop. I got to travel all around the world. I had a pristine childhood. My father gave me the greatest work ethic in the world. I retire in 12 days from today, that'll be my third retirement, on my 70th birthday. And so he gave me great work ethic. So I was the guy that was running around doing the newspapers at Camp Lejeune, and I'm pedaling this big old bicycle with a big old basket on the front of it. But see, I'm a little alcoholic in training, and I didn't realize it. I got a string tied to that bicycle with a lawnmower back behind it. And I got a gas can hanging on the handlebars, a little 1-gallon gas can. I'm not only going to deliver your paper, I'm going to cut your grass and parlay the invoice. Because that's just the way I was. I was busy from the day that I was born. Later on, they gave it out a diagnosis. When I was little, they called it rambunctious. When my son was little, they called it ADHD and started plugging him full of medication. He was one of the original kids, the test program of Ritalin, and it burnt his personality to shreds. I got to grow up in the Caribbean during my teenage years. My brother was born in Yokohama, Japan. My sister was born at Cherry Point Marine Corps Naval Air Station. And I was born in Beaufort, South Carolina, Parris Island Boot Camp, Marine Corps Boot Camp. We got to travel the world, all over the world. And when we ended up, my teenage years were always in Cuba, bless you. It was in Cuba or it was in Key West. I was in Key West, we call it BB, before Buffett. He was still in Mississippi doing what he was doing. I was in Key West in the 60s. So I was raised in the Caribbean. All we had to do was shake off our little Catholic uniform, go jump off the dock and go get langosta and get some conch shells. It was a pristine childhood. Same way in Cuba, 7 square miles of barbed wire. You couldn't go anywhere past the barbed wire, but you were in the most beautiful, pristine part of the island of Cuba, where there was unlimited visibility if you wanted to go skin diving. I never needed for anything. My dad said, if you want something, you go get it, but I will take care of all your needs. So I had no real reason to become an alcoholic. In 1973, I graduated high school in 72. In 1973, my dad retired. I got my carpenter apprenticeship overseas in Cuba. And then my dad moved to Fort Lickerdale, Florida, and started opening civilian hospitals. I turned 19 years old. I went down to the MEP station, and my dad said, oh, the Navy's going to get another good Bowdern. I said, Dad, I have been a Navy dependent for 19 years. I'm going Air Force. I've had enough of the Navy. And I joined the Air Force to go to exotic locations. I got out of boot camp, and they said, I had a guaranteed job. Back then in 1973, you could have a guaranteed job. I had a guaranteed job as a carpenter because I already got my apprenticeship. The Air Force will sign anything telling you it's a guarantee. 26th day of boot camp, they handed me my orders. I was to be an F-4 Phantom fixer jet, 1 and 2 engine fighter jet mechanic. And I looked at the guy and I said, there ain't one of those made out of mahogany. They said, well, the Air Force needs took precedence. And they said, but you have a contract that says that after 36 months you can cross-train. I said, you just broke the original contract that said I was going to be a carpenter. They said, well, disregard that. Just pay attention to the one that says after 36 months. So at 36 months, I went to this exotic location right after I got out of tech school. I'm waiting to go to Bali, Tahiti, one of those exotic locations. I got my assignment. It was Tampa, Florida. That's not exotic. Just back before Davis Island was a luxurious resort. Ybor City was a terrible place to go drinking at nighttime, but we did. And then I ended up with wife-to-be number one. Wife-to-be number one was like this. We were living together right back behind where Sandy Beach ended up retiring at the Key West Towers. We were off of Bayshore Boulevard. And so I was living in this little one-bedroom apartment, all bills paid for $110 a month, 1 block off of Bayshore Drive. And the Air Force said, you know what? If you have a wedding certificate, we will give you $160 more per month. And a $60 a month food allowance. And the math was real quick. We went down, got a wedding license, and we went to the Wee Chapel of Love on Gandy Boulevard. Some of you suck at relationships too, right? The sheriff showed up to the wedding, and it wasn't for me, it was for her. I had a great picker. You'll hear that. We like to drink. We ended up at a lot of different biker bars. I met wife number 2 to be in a car chase when wife number 1 found me with wife number 2 to be, and we entered a car chase that almost ended up in a terrible accident. I got divorced, married wife number 2. This is the family that I took through the alcoholic disease when I didn't think that there was a disease called the family disease of alcoholism. I had 3 children with that wife. We were married for 20 years. But in 1987, things started going wrong. I left Tampa and I went to Alaska. That's not the most exotic place in the world when you're thinking about Tahiti and you're a Caribbean kid. 4 years in Alaska, I said, please get me back to the sunshine. They sent me to San Bernardino, California. So I went from 38 degrees below zero to the desert in San Bernardino, California. I did a 1-year stint there, and I ended up at Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle of Florida. My drinking kept progressing and progressing. You could spend hours talking about the escapades of drinking. I don't have a resume that say I should be an alcoholic. But at some point in time, things started happening to me physically because of the way that I was drinking. And I couldn't tell anybody about the way that I was drinking. My wife couldn't tell anybody about the way that I was drinking. My kids could surely not tell anybody about the way I was drinking. And in 1987, I ended up in the emergency room for the first time. And it wasn't for a little bit too much Chardonnay. They said, "How much have you been drinking?" And I said, "Only 2. They didn't ask the volume of the 2. I just told them only 2. They put something, medication underneath my tongue, gave me a prescription, sent me back home again after I calmed down. I have these little kids. They were 11, 10, and 8 years old at the time. Second trip to the emergency room. Sunday night. First time it was a Sunday night. Best part about being a speaker. Second trip to the emergency room Sunday night. You know how God had my just passed grand sponsor, Don Major, said, you just do the stitches and leave the pattern up to God. Bob Darrell talks about connecting of the dots. Second time to the emergency room Sunday night, months later. Guess who was there? Same doctor, same nurses, and I smelled exactly the same. How much you been drinking? It was coming out of my pores. Only 2. Gave me more medication, sent me back home. Third time, April 26, 1987. Not my sobriety date. But they said something is wrong. They took me into the emergency room, and my wife was standing in the reception area with the 3 children. And you could hear every bit of noise that was going on. When you're coming unglued like that, you are fine-tuned. You can hear things vibrate. Every fiber in your body is like a raw nerve ending. And I was sitting back with the doctors, and they were pumping all kinds of stuff in me because I had stuff coming out of every orifice. And my wife was out there. I never heard of the program of Al-Anon. I never even knew about alcoholism. And I'm back there, and the doctors are trying to treat me. I'm 32 years old. I can't be an alcoholic. It's a Sunday night. And the wife is out there, and she's banging on the table. She said, "You have got to do something with them." And they said, "Ma'am, we're doing everything we can. We've got them in the back there. The doctors are taking care of them. They're doing everything they can to detox them." She said, "No, you don't understand. You've got to stop him. You have to do something with him." They said, "Ma'am, we're doing everything that we can." And then came the sound. She said, "You don't understand. He has done this 100 times before. If you let him go, he'll do it till he dies." She said, "I have beat on his chest while he's been asleep to try and get him to start breathing again." And I'm like, I don't know what's going on because I can hear that clear as a bell. And then they said the magic words, "Ma'am, we have got to detox him back there with the doctors before we take him upstairs to the mental ward." Those are the 2 words I had not heard. Things get real, things get different, and then things get really different. And what they did was they took me upstairs, and they changed my military uniform, and they gave me my new one. It was a pinstripe robe, a blue pair of pajamas, foamy slippers, but they put this bracelet around my wrist, and this bracelet said alcoholic. I can't be an alcoholic. I got medals all over my chest. I got stripes all up and down my arm. I can't be an alcoholic. I'm 13 years into the Air Force. I'm 32 years old. I can't be an alcoholic. How can I be an alcoholic? I'm not drinking. Every time that I was in the emergency room, it was on a Sunday night, and I was not drinking. That's how the alcoholic mind works sometimes. It flips things. I'm supposed to be an alcoholic because I drink too much. They're telling me I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not drinking right now. I was trying to stop drinking, and I didn't realize that was my problem. I didn't realize that until I came to AA and started listening to the music of Alcoholics Anonymous. They took me upstairs. They gave me 10 days in there. I was telling Chuck, we can go on and on about what happens in the nut ward. But they let me out there after 10 days because I signed this release paperwork. You give me a checklist. I'm a military guy. I'll do everything on the checklist. And he asked me to do all the following things and not go to alcohol treatment center. I said, I'm in charge of 600 guys out there. I have got to be able to handle. He said, if you'll do these things, we will not push you into alcohol treatment. I said, thank you. And I agreed to do all 10 things, and they let me out. And I went home and never had been to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting except the 2 that they took me to in the hospital in my military uniform with the foamy slippers. I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't absorb anything that was going on when I was detoxing and they were pumping me full of medication. That's why I think it's very important that we make sure that the man's head is in the right position when we start telling him about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I couldn't remember anything that was going on in that meeting. And they would pour me back into the elevator, take me back upstairs. But when they released me, I was now mandated to go to AA meetings. My commander made sure. I wasn't a card carrier. I wasn't a court card. I was a commander card. And what they said was, you see all these stripes and all these medals? You see that bottle of alcohol, you're going to have to make a choice. And I was 13 years into my military career. I'm not an idiot. I was going to be able to retire at 39 years old. But I'm not going to tell them I don't know if I'm an alcoholic or not. I'm going to go to your A&A meetings. And I went to AA meetings. I went to AA meetings for 6 months and 3 weeks. I did everything they asked me to do on that checklist. People would ask me, I said, who are you? I said, my name's Chip. Are you an alcoholic? I'm an alcoholic. Leave me alone. And I sat in the back of the room. And I listened to what everybody said. And here's what my ears heard. Don't drink, go to meetings, and read the big book. If I could have not drank, I wouldn't have ended up in the nut ward and had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Of myself, I can't not drink. But I can go for a period of time if I'm forced to. So I sat there for 6 months and 3 weeks. And I thought, I got to do something about this. The commander come up to me and said, you have done so well. He said, we've got these fighter jets that have got to go out to Victorville Air Force Base. I said, okay. He said, we're going to send you out there in charge of these fighter jets. We're going to take these fighter jets out there with all these crew chiefs. We've got to run all these missions at Edwards Air Force Base. We're going to launch out of Victorville. I said, okay. So I went there. Remember I said I left Alaska and went down to San Bernardino? I knew where all the bars were in San Bernardino. Guadalajara's, all them places. Go up to Santa Claus Village. Go up to the lakes and drink. So all these crew chiefs wanted to go out drinking, and I'm in charge. And I got 6 months and 3 weeks of stark, raving sobriety. But when I yell bullets, by God, you duck. Because I'm a little intense now. And they said, well, we want to go to the bars. And I said, well, I'm supposed to go to an AA meeting. I made a phone call to where this old-timer had told me that got sober in Long Beach. He was a member of Bellflower Big Book Group. Johnny was his sponsor. He said, when you go out to Victorville, Long Beach is going to be way down at the bottom. You're going to be way up the top. I said, I'm willing to go to any length. Just give me the number. And I got out there and I called the number. And she said, Burl said that you were going to call. So tomorrow we're going to have intergroup breakfast. If you want, I'll buy you a ticket and I'll save you a seat next to us. I said, I'll be there. I'll make that commitment. When they were having the speaker meeting at the intergroup breakfast, we had gone right past Long Beach with the rental car. We hit the PC-1, went straight up to Santa Barbara, and I was drinking at the end of the yacht club, the Santa Barbara Yacht Club Pier. I didn't have a slip. I didn't have a relapse. And if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, slips and relapses are not a part of recovery. I can't go back to somewhere I've never been. I wasn't a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was an attendee sitting in the back of the room. I'd done absolutely nothing about my sobriety, nothing to change the way that I was. And the kids knew it and the wife knew it, but I wasn't telling anybody. See, I could behave well in a 1-hour meeting. But then I was a Tasmanian devil to those 600 people I was in charge of. But when I yelled bullets, they ducked. But when I come home, and I walk in there and the kids would have the shoes on the floor and I'd be kicking them around saying, who's in charge of this place around here? And the kids would look at me and they'd run to go lock themselves in the door. So I'm out there and I said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to sit there. I'm going to just drink non-alcoholic beer. Oh. Has anybody tried the experiment of the non-alcoholic? Thank you. I'm not alone. I'll go out there and I'll drink the non-alcoholic beer. And I went to the first bar and they gave non-alcoholic beer. I won't tell you what it tastes like. Went to the second bar and I said, you got any non-alcoholic beer? And they said, no, but we have LA beer. I said, I'll have a LA beer. And my crew chief said, what is that? And I said, don't worry, it's non-alcoholic beer. I knew exactly what it was. Half the volume of alcohol of a normal beer. And immediately my mathematical mind was going to work. Cliff Roach said, I didn't drink for the effect produced by alcohol. I drank for the effect 8 minutes and 40 seconds later, when the magic would happen. And I drank for 3 days. And I knew my career was over. I came back and I told the commander what I did. He asked me if I learned a lesson. I said, yeah. I said, I learned I cannot control and enjoy my drinking simultaneously. See, if I'm controlling my drinking, I'm not enjoying it. And if I'm enjoying my drinking, I've lost control. Because I've gotten downtown, exactly where I need to be. And I came back. And I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous because I knew my life was over, my career was over, everything was over. And the commander said, if you tell me you learned something, go back to those meetings. I went back to the meetings, and I went up to the old timer this time. I said, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic or not. And I waited. Nobody shot me with an arrow. You loser, arrow, pow! I didn't know if I was an alcoholic or not. Now I'm 33 years old. I didn't know. I didn't know what the definition of an alcoholic was. I wasn't reading a book. I was sitting in meetings. Don't drink. Go to meetings. Read a big book. Rarely have we seen look, squirrel. I had no interest in the big book whatsoever, so I didn't change. Nothing changes, nothing changes. I went up to him, I said, what do I do? He says, Chip, you tell me that you don't know whether you're an alcoholic or not. I said, that's right. He said, well, if you're not an alcoholic, sobriety will not bother you. But if you are an alcoholic, sobriety will bother everybody around you. And I said, I think that happened. I said, what do I do? He said, why don't you do what we do? Do what we do, you get what we get. I said, what is all this crap about time? You just seen it on the countdown. What's all this stuff about time? People standing up got all this time. I had a year sobriety. I'm starting to work the steps. I said, what is all this stuff about time? He said, Chip, he said, me with 21 years and you with 1 simply means that I understand me a whole lot more than you understand you if you do the things that we do. And I said, but I got these questions. It's hell back there at the house. I can control 600 people at work, but I cannot control those 3 children. He said, what are your questions? I said, I got to have answers. We talked to Steve Lee. Steve Lee had questions. I had questions. What were your questions? I said, well, let me ask you the question. I was ready. When the pupil's ready, the teacher appears. Question number 1, what am I going to do about my Air Force career? He said, Chip, he said, we have this big book. And I'll tell you, in a lot of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous nowadays, it sounds like the big book is optional reading. Travel around the nation. It's weird. He said, we have this big book, and in the big book's a chapter to the employers. We hope you read it. And if you have any questions, you come ask me. I said, okay. What do I do about the wife? He said, Chip, we have a big book. In the big book's a chapter to the wives. We hope that you read it, and if you got questions, you come ask me. I said, okay. What do I do about them bandits running around? They're stealing from me, they're robbing from me. He said, well, it's hell when they're going through puberty, and so are you at the same time. That's not funny. It wasn't funny then. I said, what do I do about them 3 little kids? They're driving me crazy. I don't understand them. I'm afraid of them. He said, Chip, we have a big book, and in the big book's a chapter called The Family Afterwards. It'll tell you everything you know. You read it. If you got questions, you come ask me. I said, okay, what do I do about God? I got these conflicting things about crucifixes, stations of the cross. I was raised in this parochial school. He said, Chip, we have a big book, and in the big book's a chapter called We Agnostics. We hope you read it, and if you got questions, you come ask me. I said, how am I going to know whether I'm really, really, really an alcoholic or not? He said, Chip, we have a big book. For you, they gave 2 chapters. The doctor's opinion and more about alcoholism. I said, well, hey, how do I know if it's going to work? He said, Chip, we have a big book. And in the big book's a chapter called There Is a Solution. It tells you all about how it works. And I'm like, on and on and on. So why do I say that? I say that to tell you, if you're new, my sponsor never told me what to do about my wife. He never told me what to do about my kids. He never told me what to do about the Air Force. He never told me what to do about God. He never told me what to do about anything except go to the big book and read the big book. And then if you have a question, you ask me. If I don't know, I will find somebody that has the answer, that has been through it and has that experience. That's how I got to learn the big book. And I said, well, how do I know about this step 1? The step 1 stuff is killing me. And he took me to the people that could answer the questions. I'm reading about Bill. 89 years ago, we're just coming up on the time right now. On October the 11th, when Bill Wilson sobered up on December the 11th, 2 months from now, 89 years ago. 89 years ago. And I said, I don't know about this thing about, I'm trying to read Bill's story, the cool, clean wind blowing across the top of the icy mountain. This is the gods of the spires. I ain't getting this. He said, well, let's take you to some people that can talk to you the way you understand. And they taught me in stories. This is just a story. There's no circuit speaker school that you go to or a speaker school that you go to or an academy that you go to train you. This is nothing but a story. Chuck has nothing but a story. Rob has nothing but a story. I got coronary issues. I've had heart attacks. I've had open heart surgeries. I've had stents put in. I've had carotid artery. If I fall over, Neil come up, class 87, he'll just tell the rest of the story, his story. It's just a story. All of us have a story. And Bill Wilson said, your story is the greatest gift that I give you. With it, you will save the lives of countless others. The darkest past rested in God's hands. It's just a story. So every now and then we get to tell our story because it's my turn in the bucket. Next time it'll be your turn in the bucket, and I'll come back and hear you tell your story. We go all over the place just hearing people's stories. So he took me to Palm Springs. 1989, I went to the Palm Springs Roundup. It was at the Desert Marriott Resort, Indian Wells. They took a gondola to your restaurant. And there I am, a year and a half sober. And I'm still asking questions about alcoholism. And I said, what do I do? And he took me to Mac Brewster. God love Mac Brewster. These people have all gone to the big meeting in the sky. We've been losing all these giants. And Mac said, Chip, if you're like me, you probably became an alcoholic when you quit bragging about how much booze you drank and started lying about how much you really did. And something happened. The music of Alcoholics Anonymous. I learned things in stories. The carpenter man taught people in stories, and they called them parables. That's how I could understand. I listened to one old timer said, I drank just enough alcohol for the I don't give a darn light to come on. And when it flickered, you drink, and it comes back bright. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. But the one that convinced me about step one, because I was going to meetings and I was listening to people's stories, not opinions, experiences and stories, is a member of my home group got up to the podium. And this is stuff she'd probably said 100 times before, but when the pupil's ready, the teacher appeared. And I began to hear as only the deaf can hear, the way Bill described it. And she said, alcohol gave me a license to act in an unsociable manner and excuse it off by saying, I am so sorry. I would have never done that if I hadn't have been drinking. Time after time after time. To those children, to those wives, plural, to my parents. But I'm sober now and I'm doing all this deal and I'm like, oh my God, this stuff is actually starting to work. But what about step two? I know what you want me to do in step two and I'm not doing step two. He said, why aren't you doing step two? I said, look at the word. I know what you want. I got all these stripes and I got all these medals. I'm smart. I know what you want. He said, Chip, what do we want? You want me to admit I'm insane. I ain't doing it. He said, where did you hear that? I said, an open discussion meeting. I love open discussion meetings. That's where we get to find our newcomers and talk to them about the big book. But sometimes it's like, oh, you got issues? Let's get the tissues, right? And I had heard in an open discussion meeting, he said, no, Chip. He said, I'm not so sure Bill Wilson wanted you to admit you were insane. But don't you have hanging paperwork from a nut ward? I'm like, that doesn't count. It was 10 days. He said, well, why don't we go to the big book and see what Bill Wilson talked about insanity? I said, okay. He said, turn to page. Oh, they're stuck together. What? That's good. Turn to page 36 of our big book, our basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. All right. We're going to talk about Jim the Milkman. You know that guy was cool, man. An ounce of whiskey and a glass of milk. Nowadays, it would be like fruity yogurt for health reasons. Anyhow, page 36 at the bottom. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could easily take whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. Next paragraph, the insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Nay, next sentence, the insane idea won out. Next paragraph, our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in light of what always, I said, stop! I'm ready for 3. And he took me through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I did like a lot of people. I ran home to my bathroom. I closed the doors. I turned the faucets on because you know the acoustics. We used to sing like drunks in the shower. Now we're going to pray. Don't let nobody hear. Turned the faucets on. I even turned the shower on. I got down on my knees, opened my big book up, recited the third step prayer. And I waited for my effect. God, offer myself to thee, do with me and build with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Self. I, me. Mine. Take away my difficulties, those three kids. That wife. So that victory of them may bear witness to those I help of thy power, thy love, thy way of life. May I do thy will always. If honestly and humbly taken in effect, sometimes a great one is felt at once. And I went like this. Ain't no effect. They said, keep going. So I kept going and I took my inventory. Why did I take my inventory? Because they told me the best reason, Chip, for you to take your inventory is so we can stop. It was all out there. Every time there was an open discussion meeting, and anybody got a topic? Yep, I got a topic. I took my inventory because they were tired of me not taking it. One night at midnight, threw the pencil across the room, had a legal pad, started writing. And I wrote 27 pages. I went and I did my fifth step. I went and did my fifth step because I had to make an appointment to do my fifth step before I started writing. I went through all these steps, and the steps started changing my life dramatically. This guy came up to me one time. He said, Chip, he said, would you sponsor me? And I'm like, whoa, hey. I'll have this man's life in my hands. You know your first sponsor, you're right. I want you meet me tomorrow at 7 o'clock at McDonald's. 8 o'clock's the meeting. You meet me at 7 o'clock. I'll have your answer. He said, okay. I ran to the sponsor, called him up. We didn't have cell phones back then. Dial. Hello. He asked me to sponsor him. He said, what did you say? I said, I told him I had to call you. He said, Chip, he just asked you to help him, not heal him. I said, next day I ran down to central office, told the commander, I got to run down to Hollywood Boulevard. I bought every piece of literature AA had on the shelf. You know you did it. That guy showed up at McDonald's. Even the employees at McDonald's were waiting to see what was going to happen. He walked in and I had pushed all the tables together. And there was the AA altar. And his eyes were like this. And he sat down and I said, oh yeah. We're going to do every bit of this. We're going to read every bit of this. Where it says pray, we pray. Where it says work, we work. Where it says think, we think. Oh my. But I'm here to tell you, I have never seen that man drink again. Never saw him sober again either. I never saw him at all again. And what I didn't realize was I ran to the sponsor like this. What did I do wrong? He says, Chip, we have a big book. And in the big book's a chapter working with others. Evidently, you didn't read that one. You gave the guy an AA enema and he ran. Second guy asked me to sponsor him. We were sitting there in the room and he just texted me again. He's got 36 years sober. He's 8 months behind me. We've been together for 35 years. And he calls me or texts me every day, or I call him and I text him every day. 36 years sober. I can't get the guy with 2 years sober to call me once a week. But the guy with 36 years does. And that's why he has 36 years. Not because he calls me, because he follows discipline of the big book and the lessons of the giants that have gone before us. And he still has a commitment that he keeps. Another guy came and asked me to sponsor him. His name was Tim. I said, I'll do that. And so I was sponsoring him. We were working. He did a fifth step that I would have logged this in at GSO as absolutely could never drink again after he told me that. No way. That was a fifth step. Woo! Thank God we can't do YouTube, right? I said, I'm going to buy you a ticket to the Gulf Coast Roundup because that's what sponsors do. I'll buy you your first ticket and we pay it forward to the guy you sponsor constantly. The influx of new people. Friday night, he didn't show up. Empty chair. Front row. I love front row alcoholics. Saturday didn't show up. I didn't have a cell phone. Sunday morning, he didn't show up. But Monday night was arriving, and that was home group. Went to home group, he didn't show up. And I knew what he was doing. I didn't say nothing to the old timer. And after the meeting was over, I ran down there. I drove down that gravel road at 9:30 at nighttime. The headlights were shining on that cottage, and I looked, and there was the glow of the 25-inch color TV. And as soon as my headlights turned off, the TV light went off. And I'm like, oh! You're going to hide from me? Me? I am your sponsor. So I went and I knocked on the door. Open the door. And I knocked a little louder, a little louder. The neighbors were getting disturbed. And 45 minutes later, I stood there and I cried because I knew he was in there drinking and he refused to answer the door. Next day, I learned my lesson. I went to the old timer and I said, what did I do wrong? He said, Chip, because old timers love us. If we will stay close and do their work well and Bill's work well and God's work well, he said, Chip, evidently you had taken credit for his sobriety and now you're taking credit for his drinking. And I said, what do I do? He said, merely take them to the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and be a loving friend to them. And I said, wow. I got this guy that I sponsor. All these things started happening. At 10 years sober, I got a divorce. You could not put Humpty Dumpty back together again with that marriage. And I divorced a wife. I did not divorce the children. And I let them know that. I waited till the youngest was 18 years old before we filed for a dissolution of marriage. Because I didn't want him to think that I was abandoning him like so many of his other friends. Why? Because my sponsor said to do it. And that's what I did. And I waited. And for the first time in my life, I was single, sober, and serene. I moved into a motorhome. Now, I would like you to think it's one like Ron's RV, but this was a 1976 Champion. It was 26 feet long, no slide outs. And it was plugged into my sponsor's outlet at his tire store. That's what the divorce did to me financially. I'd retired from the military, opened a construction business, boom, life was good, and then it went. And that divorce ripped me apart. And I moved into this motorhome, and I'd sit there and I would whine to my sponsor. I can't believe my entire life has come down to 8 foot wide and 26 feet long. And he said, you're not allowed to exaggerate. He said, the first 4 feet are the engine compartment. And I'm like, oh, I'm down to 22. And I said, how do I do this? He said, you can't will your way out of this. You got to work your way out of it. And I worked my way out of it. 2.5 years of doing that on Boy Meets Girl on the A&A campus at home group. You're going to have these, you're going to listen to Ron with his relationship workshops. You're going to listen to all these sex and sobrieties. You're going to listen to all this financial stuff going on. I was single, sober, and serene, met the girl of my dreams in the home group. She had 6 months and I had 10 years. No, quit judging. She was 18 years younger than I was. So the wife said, the ex-wife, if you want to marry somebody the same age as your children, I said, no, she's 2 years older. Quit exaggerating. And my sponsor said, you'll get a bad reputation if you do not do this thing right. He said, but done according to guidance, you might be able to make it work. I said, what do I do? He said, you will date with other couples in recovery, whether they be AA, Al-Anon, 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 AAA. You stay with recovery couples. You do not be alone with her without her 2 little children. They were 1 and 2. He said, you do the very best you can to respect her. And I did. And 2.5 years after we were dating, we got married. And it was a Camelot wedding. It was absolutely fail-proof. His wife was her sponsor. We got married at their lake house. He sprinkled the rose petals as he walked her down the stairs. All the home group was there, and my parents and her parents, and my brother and sister officiated the wedding. Absolutely bulletproof. I could have wrote the entire script. I'm just trying to get all the actors to do exactly what I want them to do. Yep. And I launched off on a mission to take that construction business and bring it up to another level, and I did. And we ran around, we were happy, joyous, and free, and then things started happening in the marriage. Little kids started growing up. I was a little bit stressed out. You know, you could walk past my house. I was talking to Chuck about it, I finally ended up in the gated community with all the doctors and the lawyers, maybe a judge or two. And you walk past my house and hit that garage door, and there's that beautiful Corvette. Hit that garage door, and there's that beautiful Mercedes sports car. And I looked really good. But what you didn't see was 23 hours a day, me trying to maintain that status and that facade. And I was killing myself. I had arrived. She had become the director of nursing, and we were power walking down the road with my 2 little rat terriers, past the doctors and the lawyers. And I had a massive heart attack, the widowmaker. They rushed me to the hospital. They put these stents. As they were putting the stents into my heart, stainless steel, I call them plumbing, the toilet supply lines. I looked at the doctor and I said, what caused all? He said, Chip, you have a perfect diet. Your wife's the director of nursing. You have a perfect exercise program. You were exercising when this happened. He said, but man, you are so stressed out, you have turned your blood to cottage cheese. And I didn't realize stress would do that to you. I said, what do I do? He said, you need a whole total change of lifestyle. And I said, okay. So I went back home and I shut down the roofing division. I shut down the landscaping division. I shut down the fencing division. I got rid of the Corvette, got rid of the Mercedes, and she divorced me. She didn't like that change of lifestyle. And that divorce ripped me to shreds. It was my 3rd divorce. And here's the reason I'm telling you that, because you're going to hear Ron give this workshop. Him and TJ do a beautiful workshop. Chuck and me and Ron have beautiful wives, and they are program people. They're program people. We have these relationships. We get to travel around. We get to have fun together and stuff like that, but we have these relationships. And what I had done was I had my 3rd divorce in sobriety, 25 years sober. What the heck is wrong with me? I felt like I was a wounded tiger in a cage. You reached in to help me and I'd slash you. Get out of here. And I went dark on AA. You don't hear a lot of people talk about that. I went dark on AA at 25 years sober. Not because AA had anything to do with it, because my mind snapped. You know, we talked about in our cabin 55, the best cabin here, we talked about that in our cabin meeting. What is the reason? Jules asked us, what is the reason that we are here? Because we have sometimes got to get stuff out of the auspice of strangers that we know love us, that are working the same program that we do, so we can drop the stress and quit carrying the thing around. We have to drop the rock, and this is the place to do it. Central Florida Men's Workshop is the place to do it. My sponsor, Tim Highland, has a workshop up in Kentucky, Indiana. It's called the Kentucky Man-to-Man Retreat. 100 of us meet. We get to go there and land in Louisville, Kentucky, drive across the bridge into Indiana and go to a monastery. And I said, why do you call it the Kentucky Man-to-Man Retreat when it's in Indiana? He said, because it sounds better. I'm like, never mind. Sponsor. And when Don Majors passed away, he got Bush in Canada. And somebody asked me, they said, you realize you got more time than your sponsor? I said, yeah, I got more time than my grand sponsor. But who said anything about time when it comes to serenity, peace of mind, a quiet mind and a peaceful heart? I go after the people that inspire me. Bob Bazans laughed at him one time when he heard somebody ask me that question, because he sponsors Bob. Bob's class of 66. He said he got tired of his sponsors keep dying on him, so he got hold of Tim. I want to tell you something about this. I got taken through the steps again. I got taken through all 12 steps again, targeted with crosshairs on relationships. Why? Because of what Bill Wilson wrote. But it is from our twisted relations. You know that book 13 years later that got printed? Some people say, well, he did that because he needed money. Where'd you hear that? Open discussion meeting. I sat at stepping stones. A lot of you guys have sat at wit's end at stepping stones, at the desk where Bill Wilson wrote the big book, where he wrote the 12 and 12, right? And it's spooky in there. You can feel the hairs just tingling. All that history and spirituality there. But it is from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. Oh, we have been especially stupid and stubborn about them. Did y'all ever read that? Woo. The primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. You know what that meant? If you liked me, I would hurt you. I had an auto defense mechanism that if you got too close to me, whether you were child or spouse, I would push you away. Because I did not want you knowing what I was thinking or knowing what I was doing while you weren't watching. So the only way to get rid of you is to set up landmines. Because if you loved me, I would hurt you until you left. Yes, God. We follow directions. Yay! All right, everybody, the busy ones are here in the seat. Let's get started. I'm Chip, I'm an alcoholic. I established, woo! And in the big book, I established landmines. If I wanted you out of my life, here's what I would do. I would take it, I didn't realize I was doing it. I would take a landmine and I would set it out there and I would label that landmine. You ever screw around on me, that's the name of that landmine. I'd put another landmine out there. You ever steal any of my money? I'd put a name on that and I'd set it out there. You ever upset me or make me feel like I'm not wanted? You ever say no when I ask for sex? You ever do this? You ever. Landmine, names on all of them. And then I'd start guiding you through the minefield. And when I got tired and you were getting too close, I would guide you across the mines. And you need to remember, if I told you that if that mine blows up, I'm out of here. And it gave me every justification. And I didn't realize I was doing that. Now, how did that happen? How did I get to learn all that knowledge? When I was broken apart, I got disappeared and I dark. I got absolutely dark. And I'm here to tell you, if you believe in a higher power, I'm going to suggest that you possibly believe in a lower power. I'll do it again. How many people are here from the class of 1987? Okay. How many people are here in the class that you got sober with? Where did they all go? Did they all drink? Did they all die? Or did they just walk away and say, you know, if that's all you got to offer me, this is not a sufficient substitute? But they're gone. They took me out of the courtroom when I got the divorce the last time. And I came back after I was dark for 13 months. And thank God for Facebook at that time. My sponsor would go, where's Chip? And they go, we don't know. My sponsees would go, we don't know. But he's flying around in a helicopter in Kona, Hawaii, looking at rainbows, trying to get spiritual. With her. With her. And he said, oh my God. They slowly started to reel me back in. And they made me go through step 6 and 7 the way Sandy Beach takes you through step 6 and 7, dropping the rock. You know, if you ever listen to Sandy Beach, one of our great heroes, when he started talking about stuff, we talk about a different angle. We look at things from an entirely different angle. He went back to the big book when we were talking about, and I'll say this, when you take your inventory, when I took my inventory, here's what happened. I could not put the things together because of the way the big book was written. The big book has never changed, right? But I couldn't put it together. Watch this. Your 4-step list, the columns. I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. Why? His attentions to my wife. How it affects me. It pisses me off. It affects my sex, social standing, all that stuff. Where's my character defect? It's Mr. Brown. I haven't gotten any resolution from that because nobody told me to turn a page and a half. That's what Sandy did from the podium. You turn a page and a half and he asked you. He said, well, we looked at things from an entirely different angle. So when I had to look at things from an entirely different angle, it says we turned back to the list for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. What did I do to start the ball rolling with Mr. Brown? Why was Mr. Brown paying attention to my wife? What did I do that caused Mr. Brown to pay attention to my wife? What did I do to my wife to have her accept the attention from Mr. Brown? Over and over and over again, they dug in and put crosshairs on my character defects and my shortcomings when it came to relationships. And here's how they fixed that with me, because I was about to become a better man. Step 6, character defects. Step 7, shortcomings. Legal pad, step 6. For me, it had to be different. If you look in the August 1990 Grapevine, there's a picture of a great big mountain in the center staple page. And there's many different pathways going up the mountain. But it's the caption at the bottom. It says, the pathway to the top of the mountain is many and varied, but the view from the top is always the same. It didn't matter how I got there, I had to get there. Step 6, character defects. You write down item number 1, and you write down every single thing that you did that you never should have done. And I said, ooh, I got a arrest record for that. Tangible evidence. He said, now, step 7, ask God to remove your shortcomings. If you could do it, you would have done it. You can't do it, so you got to go to God. What should you have done instead? For instance, while I was off at the Hawaii State Convention in 1991 with Ken Devaney on the big screen, thousands of other people at the Hilton Waikiki on the beach, they said, where was your family at? Oh, they were at home. When you got to go around to all these different whoopee parties and conventions and jamborees and jubilees, where was your family at? Oh, they were at home. Go to the other side. What should you have done different? I said, I don't know. He said, you should have either took them with you or not gone. I'm like, ooh, that's kind of, you know the good-looking girls in Waikiki Beach. Every single thing that I had a character defect on, item number 2, item number 3. Over here I had item number 2, item number 3. What should I have done different? You know when you try to stop smoking, you got the rubber band, you snap that sucker every time you want to smoke or drink, whatever, snap to reminder. I had a reminder. I had no more excuses anymore for the person that I was that kept breaking the relationships apart, and I became a better man. Why did that happen? Because I was doing the stitches and God was doing the mosaic. I had no idea that my life was about to change. I'll describe it this way. I had been friends with my now wife, Angie, for 14 years. I had been very close friends with her daughter, Amanda Magnolia B from Montgomery, Alabama. Some of y'all might have heard her. You might have heard my wife talk. I had an intimate relationship with Amanda because she sponsored my ex-wife, the young one. Years later, she's putting me and her mother together at a podium taking a picture. And she said, you get closer together. Now, I'd known her mother for 14 years. And she took a picture, and 9 months later, 180 days later, we were married on the beach. We'd known each other for 14 years. I had 26 years sober. She had 24 in Al-Anon. Her sponsor said, you got 50 years together. You ought to make it work. Why? Because we knew what to do wrong. We had done our work and knew what we were doing wrong. Now we're going to turn it to a better use and do it right. And we got married. We sold everything. We moved down to the beach. And life was grand. All of us went through, I started changing, going through all these different changes going on. Something was going wrong physically. You know, I had the Widowmaker in 2012 when I was 25 years old. Things were happening and I didn't understand what was going wrong with me physically. But I got this guy that I was sponsoring. His name was JW. JW had severe PTSD. There's some guys in here that have PTSD. I don't have PTSD. I don't know anything about PTSD, but I'm a good retired first sergeant. He was the Army Ranger that pulled burning bodies out of helicopters. Of course he had PTSD. And he was sober, and he came and asked me to sponsor him. And I said, I'd be glad to sponsor you. So sometimes of being a sponsor, you learn the very best thing that you can do is shut up and listen. Let people purge. Let people get it out. Don't interrupt. Let them get it out. And for 4 hours, I went over there and Pete called me up. He said, I'm on a bad time. My relationships with my children all got put back together again. My relationships with my family all got put back together again. We don't have time to describe, none of us have time to describe all the years that we drank and all the years that we were sober. So you get snippets of it. But my life was wonderful. And I answered a call. And I didn't know why that happened, but I was going to find out later. JW called me up, and he was in bad shape. The shadow people had came back. And if you know what the shadow people are in the darkness of night, they start coming back at you, and they're moving. You can feel them there. It's spooky. It's spooky. Not like the DTs. It's just flat out spooky. He said, they're back. I said, I'll come get you. It was the day after Father's Day. My relationships all got put back together again with those 3 little kids, watching me get married time and time again. Now they're grown-ups. My son had threatened to kill me when I sent him a wedding invitation to marry Angie. Not just kill me, 3 pages of how he was going to kill me. You know, sometimes you try to rescue, we're going through it now, you try to rescue your children. I put them in some of my rental properties. I had to evict them. I would give him money. They said never loan money to family, just give it to him. I would expect it to come back. I would hire him in my company, and I'd have to fire him for not showing up. And it was just over and over. I just could not rescue him, right? So he threatened to kill. Well, all that got put back together again through a series of events that I didn't know what was happening. So the day after Father's Day, a couple of years ago, we'd been texting back and forth. I said, son, I love you. He was the youngest. He was the baby of the family. 340 pounds, 6'1". He had hands like gorillas, like a catcher's mitt. And he's kind of scary. But we were texting each other back and forth. I love you too. Love you, Dad. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to you. The restoration had taken place because the work had been done. And he got that call to me the next day, and I ran over and I picked him up. For 4 hours, I sat on that picnic bench. And I just listened to him purge. And he said, man, I'm done, Spons. I'm done. I feel a lot better. I said, great. Great. Because I answered the call. Took him back to his house. We have this thing in my sponsorship tree. We say spiritual muscle. Whenever we're trying to help somebody or somebody helps us, we say, thank you so much for the spiritual exercise, because I can feel the spiritual muscle. That's what we're building, the spiritual muscle that will let us go through anything when calamity hits. So after I dropped him off, I started running down the road, and I thought, oh, I forgot to tell him. Pulled off the side of the road. Day after Father's Day. Everything was great. And I called him. I said, JW, thank you so much for my spiritual muscle, man, because I feel the spiritual exercise. He said, I love you, sponsor. 40 seconds later, I got the text, my son died. Massive heart attack, 42 years old, the baby of the family. And I sat there for an instant, and when you're working these steps, and they talk to you about in the 11th step, that you pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right course. What am I supposed to do with that information? And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, because I had had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps over and over and over again by trying to help other people. Even the old timer, taking them around doing all this, paying it forward, paying it backwards. If you got a sponsor ahead of you and sponsees behind you, either way you fall, you're going to be right in the middle of that Oreo cookie. You won't get hurt. Have people with you, your tribe. And I got that message, my son died. And it put me in a shell shock. But I thought for a moment, what am I supposed to do with this? I was just about to contact my wife. And I knew with an instant, it wasn't JW that needed me. It was me that needed JW. He was preparing me for the text I was about to get 40 seconds after that. When my sponsor died, I had one sponsor for 28 years, and I got Jerry Wells from Jacksonville for 5 years because I loved him, and he started teaching me. He started taking me to deeper spiritual modes because things were happening in my life, and I had lost this constant contact with God. He said, it doesn't say what do you mean constant contact with God? That's what it says. He said, no, it's conscious contact with God. Like I said, where's he at? Where's God? All this crap is going on. Where's God? And he took me on a journey. We were talking about forgiveness. We were talking about forgiveness in cabin 55. I sold that construction business to my daughter for $1.3 million. I thought it was big until Bob Bazan said, mine was $10 million, get off the cross. And they tanked it after 9 months. And I had resentments against people. I had resentments against people in AA. I had resentments against people in my home group. But I had never had a resentment against my own child. And I could not shake it. And for 2 years, Jerry drilled me. He said, what happened? I said, I cannot get God. I cannot get God. And he said, we're going to have to take you on. He said, let me ask you a question. He said, are you running on God 8.0? And I'm like, what? I'm a contractor. I don't know computers. He said, God 8.0. He said, are you running on God 8? I said, he said, you know, the rest of us upgraded to God 10.0 when it came out. And I said, you can't upgrade God. He said, I didn't say I upgraded God. But maybe your contact needs to be upgraded. You're groping in the dark for the same light switch that used to turn the light on before, and you cannot feel it. You cannot feel the presence of God. So for 2 years, he took me on a journey. For 2 years, because I was so angry with my daughter. He said, why can't you forgive her? My daughter and her wife bought the construction business. Ugh, it went to hell. Why can't you forgive her? And I said, look at that. Look, it altered my life. Wow. He said, are you a hypocrite? It's amazing how your sponsors do sometimes to get your attention. If you ask somebody to sponsor them, you better give them the right to hurt your feelings. He said, are you a hypocrite? I'm like, I'm not a hypocrite. He said, how many meetings have you been to? Oh, thousands of meetings. This is 2015. Thousands and thousands of meetings. He said, really? You can't forgive your daughter? I said, not for what they have done. They haven't apologized. He said, at the end of the meeting, what do we do? I said, we hold hands. He said, what do we pray? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. You either believe God is or he ain't. What's your choice to be? I'm like, damn it. So I went through the process. He said, write a letter. I wrote this letter. He said, this is the amends letter to you. He told me I had to make amends to my daughter. I said, for what they did? He said, no, for what your part of it was. Find out your part. And I found out my part. Go find God. I found God in the whole thing. I was the one standing back. I wrote this amends letter. It's a page long. He said, email it to me in Jacksonville. I emailed it to him. He got back with me. He said, I need you to rewrite this letter. I'm like, what? I had 600 guys. I know how to write performance reports. I have a construction business. I know how to write proposals. He said, this is an amends. I'm like, oh. He said, Chip, this letter is so angry. I want you to reread it with a different set of eyes from a different angle. And I read it and I saw all that anger in there. And I rewrote it and I sent it back to him like. He said, I need you to rewrite it again. I said, what is wrong now? He said, I want you to take 2 words out of that. I feel. I feel you did this. I feel you did that. I feel that this is what happened to us. And I felt this. And I feel. Your daughter cannot deal with your feelings. She has her own. And right now, she knows that you're coming at her to make this thing called amends. And she's put on her Iron Man Robert Downey Jr. uniform. And she's preparing for it. And when I got done, like Norm Alpe said, it came down to a 3x5 index card. I was a liar, cheater, a thief, a rationalizer, a justifier, and a compromiser. I set up the whole contract for the purchase of that business. I set everything up. I orchestrated the payments. I did this. I did that. Even the lawyer said, God, if you don't take that deal, we'll take it. Jesus. I made it bulletproof. Remember that marriage? I made it bulletproof. And I went and I sat down next to my daughter. And my entire amends to her were this. I am so sorry for what I did. I never, ever should have had a contract with my own child like that. It was either pass or fail. There was no gray area at all. If you passed, we all made a lot of money. If you failed, it tanked. I gave you no option, and I apologize for that. What do I need to do to make it right? And I did. And today we have an outstanding relationship. But here's how that happened. My Al-Anon came up to me because she is an Al-Anon. She understands Al-Anon. And she said, are you willing to accept the fact that your relationship with your daughter will never, ever, ever be the same again? I said, wow, what do I do? She said, but it can be different. It can start on a whole new base, and you can establish the relationship that you want. I didn't know you could do that. It's amazing if you just do the work and listen to the people and follow directions. I was telling Jules, I'm closing with this. We knew I had to have a bunch of surgery in 2018, so we traveled the world and came back 2019. They had to rebuild my shoulders. We knew that. But when they redid the first shoulder, I got anesthesia, I got a ventilator tube, and then they gave me the oxycodone. And I was, 30 years sober? Well, somewhere in there. And then they noticed something was wrong with my carotid artery. They put that stethoscope up there. They said, you're blocked. They did all these tests. I was 80% blocked. They said, you survived the widowmaker, now you got the stroke maker. I said, oh, what do? They slit my throat, cut it, took it out, cleaned it, put it back in. Then they did the other shoulder. Another anesthesia, ventilator tube, oxycodone. Then they did the third operation of the shoulder, anesthesia, ventilator tube, oxycodone. I said, geez, oh man. Then the other side got blocked. They slit my throat again, other side. 4 surgeries in a row. I ain't had nothing but an aspirin before that. Beware. I thought everything was over. 8 weeks later, I ended up having a massive heart attack on the 3rd of March, 2020. We all know what happened in March of 2020. 3rd of March, 2020, they took me in the emergency room, massive heart attack. Everybody's lined up with laptops on their stomachs. COVID is rampant. Everybody's screaming and yelling. And on the 3rd of March, they ran me up to the cardiac unit, pumped me full of nitroglycerin for 6 days because I was so blocked up. Nitroglycerin opens you up, right? And they did the surgery the day before COVID was claimed a pandemic. A lot of people don't like Zoom. I'd never heard the word Zoom except I had a 55 Chevy with a Zoom rear end in it. I was a motorhead. Yeah. I opened up my eyes, and they had a laptop opened up in the cardiac unit. And I am loaded on Dilaudid. My body is safety wired back together and hog-tied stapled. And I look down there, and there's a Brady Bunch. And I'm like, dude, it's my home group. I didn't know what Zoom was. How cool was that? They quarantined me for a year because I had so many surgeries and so much anesthesia. He said, you were dead for 4 hours. You ever had open heart surgery? You're dead for 4 hours. He said, I played basketball with your heart with my fist. So for a year, I was quarantined in my house. And Zoom saved my life. I never missed a lick. But I would have been quarantined. I would have missed it. And then my personality started to change. And my wife told me, I never knew you drinking, but I've heard your story. I think you're reverting back to the person that used to drink. So they sent me in for all these tests and all these MRIs and all this stuff, and they diagnosed me with cognitive mental decline. I started losing my memory and my personality. And my wife's a clinical therapist, and she said, what's the prognosis? He said, he's going to have vascular dementia. It's just the way it's going to be. And I'm like, where is that crap in the big book? What chapter? This is not supposed to happen. I'm getting ready. Why is my life going to go down the toilet like this? So a year ago, they upped the diagnosis to vascular dementia. And things, we had to massively change our entire structure. We got on the airplane yesterday. The day before that, I was telling Chuck the doctor pulled my driver's license. He said, you can no longer drive. I got a Cadillac. And my wife said, we will navigate this together. We will navigate it together. So we don't know how much. If you Google vascular dementia, the lifespan of vascular dementia is average of 5 years from diagnosis. Some live longer, some live less. But if you got told you had 5 years left to go, what would you do? I'm just having the best time I can. And we're having the best time we can. We're going to Vancouver. We're going to Alaska with Snow Piccolo after Vancouver. We got to go on the sober cruise and speak last year. Ron and TJ are going this time. Chuck and Beth got the time before that. World's largest cruise ship in the world. We're having a blast. We are blowing it out. Because that's what God told me to do. Doesn't matter what the consequence is, be happy, be joyous, and be free. So what was my choice going to be? We cried. We were at a Fellowship of the Spirit in Tennessee. You're way out there in the woods, if you've ever been there. That's where they have the usual suspects at. I have to have people around me constantly, because I'll get lost. And if people say, it doesn't sound like you have vascular dementia. Vascular dementia is a step. You drop in steps. Regular dementia is a slide. And everybody in my home group knows it. Everybody in my family knows it. My mother said, I don't think he has anything wrong. And my wife said, you would not notice unless you live with him. He's beginning to forget everything. That's why I'm retiring. I could run that business in my sleep, but it stopped happening. They said, your business and your recovery would be the last things to go. So what would you do? Why are you here? All weekend long, you're going to see all of us gathered together in workshops, and kneecap to kneecap, eyeball to eyeball, doing the same thing. Helping each other lighten the load a little bit, because whatever you got here that's weighing you down, I hope you let it leave. Thank y'all for inviting me here.